Hello. In this video we're gonna be looking at this braided wig tutorial, so sit back, relax and enjoy. This shouldn't take much of your time. Hopefully it's just an 18 minutes clip. So to the video, guys. So first of all, what I did was sew a net or a mesh on the crown area of the wig cap, and then I sewed the closure on it. Now for this, I'm going to bring out a clip from a previous video I did so you guys will see how I went about it. And the next thing I do is select a shade of net or mesh that is closest to the owner of the wig I'm making. Now this is something I do for every braid kind of wig that I wouldn't be using a frontal or a closure for. I make use of this kind of net to one, to blend with the skin of the person, and two, to have a strong hold, because the net that is usually on the crown of this kind of wig cap is always very soft. So what I just do is I place the net on the crown of the wig cap and then I start to sew. There's a particular method of sewing I use in attaching the net to the wig cap, and this is so that the thread doesn't really get to show. I've been stuck on your memory, but it's not like I need it, and we may have some history, but we don't have to repeat it. Now when tucking in this net in the front part of the wig cap, I try to make sure everywhere is all smoothened out so that by the time I'm done sewing, everything looks even and smoothened out basically. So here is the method of sewing I was talking about earlier, guys. You see how it's just dots of thread that are showing. The major part of the thread is under the wig cap. So at this point I'm just going to make sure I tack everything and secure the mesh on the wig cap properly. On a side note, this wig wasn't made for me, so there might be slight difference in the tone of the net being sewn and my skin tone. That is when I get to try it out for you guys to see how it looks. And as it is with a closure or frontal, it's always best to apply your foundation or your powder on the wig so that it blends out evenly with your skin tone. And by wig I mean the crown area. Because this process is not done by a machine or something of that sort, there will definitely come a point where you'll have to fold the net like I'm doing so here, so that the sewing will come out smooth as we want it to be. Now this folding can actually be done at any point in the sewing process, but I usually like to do mine towards the end when I am almost done with everything and I have everything all figured out. So after sewing, I cut off any extra piece of net like I'm doing so, and even under the wig cap, any extra piece of net, I cut everything off. So the clip you just saw showing me how I sew the nets on the crown area of the wig cap is from a previous tutorial, and since I had recorded the process already, I didn't feel there's a need to record it again on this for this tutorial. So unfortunately I still have the video on my system. Anyways, back to this tutorial. So here you can see that I am braiding the back of the wig cap, and the braids are kind of like far apart from each other. Well, the system I'm using in braiding, or the system I generally use in braiding, is step by step. It just makes it easier, you get, and coordinated, I would say. And
you would very soon get to see what I mean by the step by step. That's for those of you who haven't seen any of my braid tutorials before, so you would see what I mean by the step-by-step tutorial. And these parts might not really seem necessary, but I want to believe no information is useless, so every bit of information is useful. Like everything makes up the whole tutorial, you get that kind of stuff. So this is just me showing how I move my fingers. This is just me this is just me showing how, you know, the movement of my fingers as I braid each strand. So very soon you're going to see what I meant by the step-by-step system. Yeah, so this is it here. This is the third line. If you check properly, you would see there are two lines below this very one I'm crocheting the Kelon braid on. So at the moment, what I'm doing is, you know, having something to make my braid on basically, and doing this all together for each line makes it easier than pulling out a strand, braiding it, pulling out another strand, braiding it. So once I have all this done on any line, I would then start braiding all of them together. You get that kind of stuff. So, you know, even if what I'm saying might be confusing, at least as you're seeing what I'm talking about, you'll be getting a clear idea of what I'm talking about. So having brought out the braid for the last piece on that line, what I will then do is to start braiding like I was talking about earlier. These things are these strands of hairs I'm pulling out on, you know, on different parts for this line act as a base for my braid. Some people would braid the strands separately and then either sew them on the wig cap or something like that, but I prefer to braid on the wig cap directly. So you see what I'm talking about? Like, instead of creating a base, I'm going to call these things I just did here now base. So rather than braid on every individual base I create all the base for that line first and then just start braiding on them, you get. But it mustn't be that way for you. You can do whatever you get seems easier for you. Now for box braids, when you get the tip, it's always best to twist them. Do not just get the tip and leave it just like that. Twist them, it gives the tips a more sleek look. Now what I'm doing here is I'm stretching the cankelon braid. You know, as you keep going higher, you might find yourself needing to stretch the braids to meet up with the length of the braids below. You get ya dig? Anyway, so this is a clearer view of what I meant by step-by-step system. You can see the braids are well arranged on lines, on you know, steps, on lines. Every braid is arranged. Every braid has a line or a step it falls on. So here I'm showing you guys the first step and the second, the third, and you get all that and all that and all that. So at this point I thought it would be best to use something to give a clear illustration. So I am coming back with my chalk. If you remember, I've used this chalk in one of my hair videos. So this just gives a better visual of, you know, the whole work process. So here once more I have repeated the base process and I am once again getting to work on my braids. And you will notice what I'm actually trying to show here is that every braid falls in between two that are below it. Like you see this one I just showed you, it's below, it's falling in between two that are below it. You get that kind of stuff. So it makes the whole arrangement more organized, neater, and stuff like that. So you might be surprised or you might feel like, oh, my braids are too far apart, but don't worry, I got you covered. I know what I'm doing. Anyways, I am ascending. It is always best to leave the back of the wig cap kind of scanty. Always best. Do not get the back area really filled up and then you come to the front, it's also filled up again, and then the person is carrying bags of cement on their head. No. So leave the back scanty. Just don't worry, you will still get back to it at the end. So you're seeing how the braid looks, organized, falling properly, laying properly on themselves. Now I'm coming to the not I'm coming. Now I'm on the closure area and I'm trying to fill up the edge of the closure. So yes, that is what I'm showing here by pointing my hands on the edge. I am going to fill up the edge area, and this is it here. This is what I just did, but obviously the edges are not properly filled up, so I'm still going to go back in on the edge to fill them up properly. Now in doing so, I would need to go back in with my crochet pin and do the crochet method to fill up the edges properly. Wow, this voiceover is talk, man. This voiceover is work, serious work, because you just be talking, trying to meet up with what your video is showing and all that stuff. Anyways, so so what I'm basically doing here is trying to fill up the edges, because doing so with the strands of hair and with the size of braids I'm doing is obviously not possible, and I need the edges to be properly covered. So I went back in with my crochet braid, with my crochet pin. So you can see the braid I just worked on has covered the space in between two strands, and that is how I'm going to fill in between every two strands, like I'm showing you guys at the moment. So here I have everywhere on the edge of the closure covered up. You can see there are no space left in between, and obviously you see I have already finished braiding on the other parts of the closure. Now, to ensure no stone is being left unturned, I'm showing the placement and movement of my hands while catching or starting a braid. You can see the movement of my hands here. I flipped over the braiding hair on my hands and I'm pulling on one part of the braiding hair. Please take note of this movement, especially for those who have difficulties catching the braid. This pulling of one end and flipping of my hands is to ensure the braiding hair doesn't lose posture or slip out of your fingers while you are starting the braid. I hope you understood what I just said, and for better understanding, practice would always help out. So whatever you learn online, it is always best to practice. You might not exactly get it on first trial, but with more practice you'll definitely get a hold of whatever it is you've learned. So please take note of how my hands are moving. This is just for those who don't know the first thing about braiding, box braiding a hair. So here I've touched on all the strategic areas of the wig, and I'm going back in to look for areas to fill up. The whole idea behind leaving some areas scanty and coming back later to fill them up is to make sure the wig isn't too heavy, while at the same time you have the necessary areas covered up. So here I have everything all done. I filled up the areas I needed to fill up, at the same time making sure the wig isn't heavy. The next thing I will do is to trim the braids one by one with a pair of scissors. But the truth is, I didn't do so for this week. I just put this out for putting sake. I have a video showing how I easily and quickly trim braids, because using scissors really takes time. I couldn't show the process of me soaking the hair in hot water and giving it this sleek look, but that wouldn't be an issue. I would only need you guys to be more imaginative here, because I'm going to give an illustration. So here, imagine you have your hot water in a basin or a container like this. You would hold the end of your braids as I'm doing so, and then soak in the hot water. See how you can soak everything, like as much as you can, into the hot water, and then you bring out. When it's out, the tips are not going to look sleek like this, rather they're going to look rough, but that is not an issue still. What you will do next is lower your grip on the braid. As you can see, my grip has come closer to the tip of the braid, and then soak it again into the hot water. All these things, you make sure you're doing them as quick as possible before the water gets cold. You then go in with your piece of rag to stretch out and detangle. Your hand is going to need to be in a certain form like I am showing here now, so that you can detangle while at the same time stretching out. So the process is detangle, stretch out, detangle, stretch out. So of course you're going to do this with your rag. You will detangle and then stretch out. After that, you go in with your scissors and trim as necessary. Of course, you need to apply hot water on other areas of the braid. If it's a wig, you can just lay the soaked rag on the braid like that and let the hot water flow down. But if it's someone's head, of course, you dry it out and just use the heat on the rag to touch the braid. So the next thing here I'm doing is cutting out the unnecessary parts of the wig. That's the net under where I sewed the closure. So now that you have your wig all set, you just go ahead and style the baby hairs as you want. So this is it here, guys. This is how the hair looks. You can see it looks really laid, proportionate. It's obviously not heavy. It doesn't seem like a burden or too much load on my head, you get. And I think I look fly. I'm feeling myself. Yep, I'm feeling myself. You guys should wait to see what I'm about to show you guys next. Oh my goodness. Look here. God knows I feel so comfortable with my low cut these days. I can't even describe it. I swear. Like, if not for tutorials, I really do not put anything on my head. Hair or no hair, I'm a fine girl. Yeah. So guys, at this point it's au revoir. Till my next video, stay blessed, stay out of trouble, and I love you all as always. Bye bye.